Hi, this is Michael Waits, and welcome back to India Game Changer. Today we are joined by Shaayak Chatterjee, a co-founder, I love the name of this company, at Breathe ESG. It is great to have you on the show. Thank you so much for doing this. How are you doing today?
Thanks, Michael. It's great to be here. I'm doing amazing as usual.
As usual, I love a guy who's living a great life. So before we get into the main part of this conversation, can you give us some of your background for some context, yeah?
Sure, I'm Shaayak Chatterjee, for those of you that don't know who I am. I am the co-founder of Breathe ESG, which is an enterprise SaaS company that's out here to streamline sustainability management. To put it simply, we help large organizations measure, manage, and report on their sustainability. And a little bit about me, I'm also an avid musician. I love sports. I studied in college for a couple of years, apparently.
What is this I studied in college for a couple of years apparently thing? What does that mean?
I don't think where you studied really has anything to do with what you do and why you're important. So I find it a bit pretentious when people think that the place where they studied gives them any value. The importance that and value that you can give to someone should be based on what you're saying, not what other people have done from the place you were at. So don't want to live off the laurels of others. And yeah, that's pretty much me.
What kind of music? Like you said, you're a musician. What kind of music do you do? Do you sing? Do you write? Do you do all that stuff?
Uh, Gone are those days, to be very honest. But I've been playing the guitar for ages. As one does, as you go deep into it, you kind of branch out horizontally. So yeah, recording. I don't sing myself, but I've worked with a lot of bands. I was part of a band till COVID happened called Apartment Upstairs. They're still around. Support them, show them some love. I'm still in touch. I listen to pretty much everything. I grew up on a lot of my dad's music, so a lot of rock, classic rock from the 70s and 80s. But kind of branched out from there and love everything.
So I love talking about the things that people do that are outside of their work, the things that maybe they don't have time to do anymore. Playing a guitar is non-trivial. And if you look at some of the greatest guitarists in the world, like they're probably actually good at math as well, if you think about it. Because
Yeah.
yeah, because music, and again, I'm curious about your insights here. I used to say that math was not invented; it was discovered, right? Because it just exists in the universe, and
Yep.
I think music is the same way because I think it's very mathematical. So in the sense that that new riff that you have or that new thing, it was always there. You just needed to discover the fact that it sounded great. So I think the fact that, and I think in a way, software is the same way. Like building a software business is the same thing. It's like if we put all this code together in this way,
Yeah.
it can do that thing. So we've discovered that that's possible. And I'm curious if you see some sort of analogy between the music that you love doing and the dedication, the discipline that it takes to build this company and write that software.
Totally. Like you said, music is math. I mean, the terms that I use to describe notes are intervals, right?
Yep.
It's all about the math and rhythm as well. And I think not just software, just entrepreneurship as a whole, but especially with software, considering how it works, is extremely mathematical. There's an order to things,
Yep.
and you do discover it. That's why we iterate, right? It's like the principle of agile development is iteration, is because you may not always solve the problem the right way. You might get to the solution, but it's not the most elegant solution to begin with. You have to have that kind of approach to proofs or the mathematical or quantitative approach to what you're doing. While I think it's important not to lose sight of the bigger picture, so not to be too robotic about it, right? Because there is a human element where in I there's a saying which my family grew me up on is perfect is the enemy of good enough. So a relentless mathematical approach to things, right, would make you chase perfection at the cost of getting stuff out there. As a startup, relentlessly shipping your product, shipping upgrades to your product is a huge part of what you do.
Yeah.
So there's a fine line to balance, but 100% you cannot go into this kind of endeavor without having the approach or that bent of mind.
I love this phrase, perfect is the enemy of good enough. It's the Pareto principle at scale, right? It's just saying like
Mhm.
80% of what you do is going to be done by 20% of the effort that you give. This is just really important stuff to learn. And once you learn that, like it unpacks a whole bunch of magic, I think. Talk to me about why you got involved in the ESG space?
There's two types of entrepreneurs.
Fair enough.
One is someone who wants to be an entrepreneur first, right? And they're looking for the next thing to do. They're looking for an idea to turn into a startup. That was not my case.
No.
So I mean, like you, I studied economics at a liberal arts college in India. I was ready for the job route and actually had the privilege of starting my career in the climate space, working with the India Climate Collaborative.
Good for you.
And that's where I was really exposed. Now, you had mentioned you like the name Breathe, right? That's part of our motivation. So I studied in the Delhi NCR region, notorious for being one of the most polluted places on the planet, especially during this phase of the year,
Yeah.
right? Smog, you can see the air you breathe, right?
Wow.
So that really drove me. And then I started my career, like I said, in climate. And I realized that not only is there a huge problem that the world or geopolitically, I mean, they have to have consensus now because it's gotten so bad. But even on a day-to-day basis, there is actual behavior change happening because by 2030, right, the millennials and Gen Z are going to outnumber the guys before them, the baby boomers, etc. I mean, to be frank, that's just the maths of it.
Yep.
So we care, right? They didn't. Now, in this microcosm, there is a viable path to a career in the space. So I was all hell set in making my career in this space when a good friend of mine, my co-founder, we studied together, Karan Taj, right? And we done a semester in the US together as well, where we saw this kind of change happening a little ahead. The West is a few years ahead of where India is at now, but they're still facing the same problems,
Yeah.
right? And he was working as an ESG consultant as well. So we realized that instead of going abroad, getting a degree, right, we can build a solution for the global problems from India, right? And since you said like 5 years back, it was blockchain or whatever, right? Since ESG is a new trend, we were actually some of the more experienced people in the field,
Yeah.
because it doesn't matter if you have 10 to 12 years of work experience in a new domain, right? If a domain has only existed for 3 years, you cannot know more. You may know more about the nitty gritties, about entrepreneurship, etc. So we really believed that there was an opportunity for us there. And that kind of what brought us to this point. And then obviously, since we've been building, right, we've got a very nuanced understanding of the space.
There's so many things that I want to ask you about, but I want to point out to people that aren't so familiar with the sort of startup ecosystem. You said this like building in India for the world. And I think there are two ways to look at this, right? There's a whole cohort of people that are building in India for India and investing the same in the same way. But there are also a lot of Indians who've studied overseas, who've been overseas, right? Who see it and then come home and think, I want to build in India, but I want to build for the rest of the world. Because the previous generation for you, or a half generation prior to you, said, I want to live in Texas, or I want to live in California, or I want to live in Boston, and I want to build something. I'm proud of being Indian, but the opportunity to build in India is not there yet. What was it that drove you and your co-founder to say, that's no longer true? I want people to understand why, right? But we're going to build in India for the rest of the world.
Yeah. So I'm not shy of accepting my privilege, right? My father is a psychiatrist in the armed forces. My mother is a technologist. She's been working in banks, right? So while I may not be of the richest background, even someone of my background is the top 1% of the 1% because we have a billion people.
Right.
So I have seen places around the world. I mean, I studied in the Bay Area, right? I mean, it's not as different from India as people think. And if you go to the Middle East, if you go to countries in East Asia, Eastern Europe, you realize that India is a country where there is upward mobility
Yeah.
right now. The per capita income, of course, is far lower, and there is income inequality, but the trajectory is upward. Now, if you look at countries in the West, they're living their utopia, they're in decline. Let's be frank, right? The UK, the US, they are in decline, especially, countries where the average age is super high. Our average age is like 26, 27. So understanding that if I'm building for the long term, first of all, my access to a labor force is the best over here. Second, if you look at the level of education that we have over here, right, we have more engineers than countries have people. So an
Right.
access to talent, right? Why would I leave? And then finally, I think there is no reason why especially with the internet and with the access that people have with tools like ChatGPT, with tools like GitHub Copilot, right? My developer base now codes 50% faster than people did 3, 4 years ago.
Right.
And these tools just get smarter and smarter. So the productivity increase from someone who is of, let's say, the same talent level as someone in the US, I'm able to get far more productivity out of them because I have the comfort zone, language barriers not there, right? I'm able to relate to them. And finally, frankly, there is a cost arbitrage as well, right? Of
Yeah.
building in India and selling to the world. Now, it's true that investors may not be giving us the same terms that companies get in the US, but having an inflated valuation is a gift and a curse,
It's a curse to me.
right?
I wouldn't even say it's a gift. I would say it's a curse, particularly in the current environment. And I
Honestly.
was going to say that. Do you mind if I, because I want to say this really strongly, actually. Having a lower valuation, if nothing else, it's an incentive for you to build even bigger and build even better, right? Because over time, the expectations on you and the light that's getting shined on you is kind of lighter, right? So it gives you this ability to build in a way that if you have $1 billion valuation after being alive for 6 months, like it happens in Silicon Valley, this is very
Mhm,
unhealthy from a founder
mhm.
standpoint, I think. No?
Totally. I mean, not just that, right? Finally, I mean, I don't know how much of this people who may be listening are aware, but right, there's a lot of vanity that
Yeah.
goes into valuations and
Yeah.
investments, right? It's all about the round figures. There is no pure science that arrives at a particular valuation, right? They look at the numbers and then they pick the multiple that gives them the best vanity metric.
Right.
So I think being aware of these, like again, I told you, I'm not shy of my privilege. I know people who have done this. I know people who
Yeah.
work in this space, right? If I've spoken to them and I've learned these things about the space, I should use that to my advantage.
Absolutely.
So I firmly believe that have like if you're raising less money, but you're in a economy where there is a cost arbitrage opportunity, you need less money.
Yeah.
So I was totally happy with that, not doing a whole Delaware flip and trying to get to Silicon Valley now, because I do believe that they are happy to spray and pray, right? They just need 1 out of 20 companies to work for their unit economics. So you need someone whose incentives are aligned with you
Right.
and also get the faith. So board control is different from percentage ownership of your company, and that's what really matters.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
getting your investment at terms that are beneficial to you while retaining control at this stage, right? We're a pre-seed company going for our seed maybe next year is super important. You need
Yeah.
to have that agency.
Yeah. I mean,
So I think, yeah,
I was just going to
that's
say, like, I
that's
tell
pretty much
startups
it.
this all the time. The more you own, the more ownership you retain, the better off you are going forward. And the easier, I put that in quotes, it's going to be for you to raise money later. Because if you dilute yourself too early, even at a high valuation, one, you won't make any money in the long term. But two, no one's going to invest in a company where the founders own like 20% of the company. It's just not healthy any way you look at it, right?
Exactly.
So talk to me more about Breathe. Talk to me what you're trying to accomplish and exactly what you're building and how it helps companies do the thing that you want them to do.
I'd like to set some context before we begin because I'm
Please.
not. ESG is kind of thrown around a lot. It's become a buzzword. It's
Yeah.
highly politicized, but I want to get to the nitty-gritties of it, and I think the listeners would appreciate that. Right. So in 2015, about 136 countries, making up 90% of the world's GDP, agreed upon the fact that, to put it simply, we're screwed. So we need to work towards first reducing our carbon emissions, improving the outcomes for underprivileged people worldwide, right? And then genuinely addressing the effects of climate change. This was set in stone pretty much by these countries. Now, corporates take a while to react. But what happened is, to put it simply, there was two sets of goals. One is for 2030, which is called NDCs, Nationally Determined Contributions. Right? Every country said, I will achieve these 2 or 3 goals by 2030 because they're critical. For example, India's goal was to go to 450 gigawatts of renewable energy by 2030. In 2015, they set this goal when they had 27 gigawatts of installed renewable energy.
Mm.
We're on track to overshoot that goal, right? So now imagine that's the largest sustainable energy transition in the world,
In the world, yeah.
fastest growing market, etc.
Yeah.
But that's just one of the goals. Every country had this. And there was a separate thing, which is the net zero target. That is when you go into carbon neutral as a country. Now, this is different for different countries because it's hard, right? Like maybe Western countries might say, I want to be net zero by 2030, by 2050. India's own goal is 2070 because obviously it's really hard to decarbonize a country like us.
Yeah.
Most of our power is from coal. It's obviously more important to do poverty reduction first, etc. Now, this happened, but the world was kind of confused. How do we go about this, right? What is the way for us to actually do this? Because when a country says, I'm going to reduce my emissions, what does that mean? It actually means the companies in my country that are creating these emissions, for example, factories, power plants, etc., they have to reduce their emissions. How do we enforce this? First, we need buy-in from them. We need to incentivize this transition. We need to have a framework that people agree upon for us to compare and contrast, etc. This is when there was a sort of revitalization of this age-old adage, people, planet, profit, right? It's from the 90s. It was just something that was thrown around. It kind of manifested into this concept of ESG, which stands for environmental, social, and governance. Not just the environmental aspects, but an overall view of sustainability, right? A way to look into the non-financial aspects of a company, right? Because the only information we have about companies now is the annual reports, etc.
Yeah.
So this is the context setting. Now, the real world sort of implications of this is now there are regulatory tailwinds towards pushing this ESG as a concept so that we know about these. We have data about these factors, usually pushed by stock exchanges, right? Basically, like your SEC in the US, SEBI in India, right? The EU as a whole, as well as investors. So large investors, large private equity investors, basically BlackRock, Blackstone also got involved in this, right? They realize that they are also liable since their asset under management
Right.
is so large, right? That they are also liable to do this. While they may not be directly causing the emissions, it's their investments that are doing this.
Yeah, and they're benefiting from it
So
from an increasing in the market cap of these companies, right? So if the increase in that
exactly.
market cap is benefiting them, they should also then get the benefit of the net zero and the ESG as well. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And another thing is an investor loves information, right?
Yeah.
Principle of efficient markets.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is another lens, or this is a less spoken about aspect of ESG, is that a company is incentivized to do ESG also because it allows an investor a further lens into your company, more information into your company to compare to a competitor. So now let's say two equally like equal companies
Yep.
are there for consideration, one with an ESG report, one without. It's a competitive advantage for that company. So these were the tailwinds that were happening. And when companies go in to sort of avail this, they've never done this before. Even now, even in 2023, it sort of picked up steam in 2019. It's 10x between 2019 and 2023,
Yep.
the market size. But companies are still doing it for the first time, especially out here in Asia, right? Asia, Middle East.
Yeah, for sure. It's probably later here than it is in the West for sure. But what kind of data are you gathering exactly?
Mhm.
And almost as importantly, how do you gather that data? And then the third thing is, how do you make that data comparative so that company A and company B are measuring the same things or at least similar things so that you can make that comparison? Like you said, there's a difference between having no ESG report and having one for sure. This is the competitive advantage. But having one for both companies, then being able to compare them, it has to be apples to
Amazing.
apples. So how does all that stuff work?
Amazing. Amazing. So that's a great question. Let me start from the top. Uh, when you look at the individual pillars, right? So E, S, and G, they mean different things. So when it comes to governance, most of that is already there within the company. It's just that the public is getting to know about it. It's not that this data has to be created. It's that it has to be disclosed, right? Each individual metric is known as a disclosure. So governance disclosures are stuff that is already known, similar with social. So these are your diversity and equity metrics, right? Within your organization, for example, your gender ratio,
Yep.
your pay split, stuff like that. There are aspects in social now, since it's all about your interactions with different communities, that companies have to do for the first time. Do they have a sustainable sourcing policy in place? This is almost like a yes, no,
Right.
right? Then within that, what metrics are you tracking? When it comes to environmental, that's where there is a bit of a challenge. The first challenge is, right, comparing apples to apples actually happens within industries, meaning an insurance company and an aviation company have a totally different set of metrics that are applicable to them,
By
right?
definition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we'll get into within that. But how do you decide which metrics to choose? There's a process called a materiality assessment, right? So you actually have to decide which topics are relevant to me because of the industry I'm in. Is emissions more important, or is workplace safety more important when I'm a construction company, right? What are the injuries that are happening, etc. So once that process is complete, right, then the topics are determined. And when it comes to environmental data, a lot of it is existing in silos, because your energy consumption, for example, is something you actively track because it's a huge cost implication,
Right.
but it's never been disclosed to the public. The thing is, your emissions also come from there, your fuel, the amount of water you're consuming. You actually have this data, but since your sustainability team is like sitting on top, right, reporting to the CXOs, they don't have access to that granular data. So this is where Breathe comes in. We are a full stack sustainability management solution, meaning from your materiality assessment till your report, right? We make sure that technology is there to take care of this process. When it comes to collecting data, right, the first thing that we do is we try and integrate with the business systems that have this data existent, right? Meaning you have this data, you never reported it on it before, and it's stuck in different systems like your SAPs, right? Your building management systems, right? Your HRMS like your Zoho, Darwinbox, Microsoft, etc. Microsoft Dynamics, right? Where you have your gender splits, your average wages, etc. Now, once that's done, that data is stored centrally for sustainability purpose. So these different silos are linked, and we've got only what's relevant for your sustainability. So the other stuff, the guys who are focused on it, they can continue to do that. But your sustainability team now has the bigger picture. The places where you don't have systems, right? We become that first line of defense. So we are able to collect the data manually using these particular set of rules, right? Validation rules like evidence attachments, sources, right? Split the company up into different business units so that you have granular insights. We become that first line of defense where they can start using us. So wherever the organization we work with is at in the sustainability journey, we can go and meet them there and start bringing them onto this journey. Now, once that data is stored centrally,
Yeah, so
right?
like, this sounds like
That
just like a massive problem to solve. Just based on all the things you've said just in the last 10 minutes, sounds like a massive problem to solve. How big is your team? Just out of curiosity. I feel like it should be
a team
10,000
of
people.
it's 11 people.
Sorry, go ahead. I interrupted you. Because there's a massive amount
Yeah.
of stuff here, right? That's going on.
Yeah.
And because, as you said correctly earlier, you can't compare an airline to an insurance company. But both of them do fly, right? So if your headquarters is in Chicago, but you've got a business in Singapore, you've got to get on a plane and go there every now and then. So you still have to measure that too. And like, so there's some equivalencies, but you're building different products for every industry on top of building an overall product, no, for the
I
entire world.
wouldn't
Yeah.
I wouldn't classify it like that.
Go ahead.
So the good thing is, I mean, we are not solving the core problem here, which is that when it comes to your direct emissions versus your indirect emissions, right? For an aviation company, the fuel they consume to fly their planes is a direct emission as a result of their business. For the insurance company, the flights that they're taking is an indirect emission. These classifications exist.
Yeah.
Our job is to make the calculation easier. So we don't really have to solve each individual industry per se. At the same time, what you're saying is very true. So our outbound focus is currently on real estate and manufacturing companies, since real estate contributes 20% of global emissions, right? The built environment. So
Yep.
that includes hospitality, that includes malls, etc. And when we're talking about manufacturing, it's pretty obvious why they need it,
Yeah.
right? So we do have a detailed focus on these industries going really deep. At the same time, uh, our job is to actually make this easier. So we are taking information that exists within subject matter experts' heads or something that is primarily service driven, like you would go to an Accenture, KPMG, McKinsey to do this for you,
Right.
right? We are taking that tacit information and making it more accessible through technology. So it is not, while it is a large problem, I don't want to make people who are listening to this think that it's something that's that easy to solve,
It's
because if
not.
they go about to do it, right, I
Yeah.
wouldn't want anyone to just jump into it without realizing. It is not something that's quote unquote impossible, because the
Right.
way that you were possibly thinking about it, 11 people would not be able to do that. And I don't want anyone to think that we're kind of winging it.
That was the point I wanted to make, actually, is that this is a massive problem. It's not intractable. It is solvable. And in the same way that we talked about, music is not invented, it's discovered. In the same way, the solution to this problem is also not invented, it's discovered. It's the same thing. And I think this is why I want to point it out at the beginning. But the other really important thing is that because of the way technology allows you to scale, I wanted to make the distinction that it sounds like you need 10,000 people or 100,000 people to do this. But with a targeted way to kind of get impact, you can do it with 11 people, because if you build the right software, right? Again, if you discover the right way to do it, it should be getting back to, I want to get this phrase you said properly. Don't tell me. Perfection is, don't tell me. I wrote it down. Perfect is the enemy of good enough, right? And if you think about it in those terms, you want to build systems that are good enough for people to disintermediate the impact that they're having on the environment that's negative and on social as well. And also governments kind of takes care of itself at some level. But if you can do that, then you're succeeding. And that was kind of the point that I wanted to make. Please go ahead.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. I think our role in this transition, see, the transition to a sustainable planet is happening whether people like it or not,
Yeah.
because we need it.
Yeah.
Right. And the richest man in the world runs a sustainable company. So that should give you as much interest in this topic
Who is
as you
that?
need. Elon Musk, right? Tesla is an electric vehicle and a solar energy company, right? There's a reason why it's valued at what it's valued. And the transition is something that is imperative because oil is also getting over, meaning our energy requirement is continuously increasing and our source of energy is continuously decreasing, right? The existing source.
Yeah.
So now within this transition, where we sit is we make this process easier, right? People can align with this journey that the world is taking as a whole far easier. And it puts us in a great place because since we're corporate facing, but we are a measurement and management tool, right? We become the perfect vehicle to actually supply them with the initiatives they need to make a positive difference. So where we come in, right? Measure, manage, and report. The next step is to reduce your impact.
Right.
Now, we already, I mean, the privilege of being in the Indian climate tech ecosystem is there's so many builders here, so many talented builders here, right? We already have tie-ups with guys that help with water management, energy metering, solar installations, PPAs, VPPAs, RECs, right? All of that. So now when a company looks at their ESG profile, right, outside of the reporting aspect, when it looks at their sustainability management picture at a granular level, they know what initiatives they need because they know where they're lacking.
Right.
And we can actually provide them with the right partner that's empaneled by us, whose job it is 24/7 to look at this, right? And they can then actually make a tangible difference. So I think we have a really important role to play in how this transition is going to actually play out, because companies are just going to be hit with it. One day they're going to be like, wow, I have to do this now.
Right.
And, the goal is that they do it with minimal friction so that it's business as usual for them, but the difference is actually being made, because that's what we all need. It's a collective responsibility.
A few months ago, I did a recording with Alex Bouaziz, right, who runs a company called Deal. And essentially what Deal is doing there is they're abstracting out from big corporates and even from small companies the human resources functionality, right? Starting with salaries and payments, but also just the whole human resources stack. The idea there is that every company has its own HR department, which is kind of a waste of time because all of them are doing the exact same things. And not all of them are as efficient at learning what all the local regulations are and understanding, what the impact is on hiring people and firing people and paying people everywhere. And essentially, you're doing the same thing. You're saying every company needs to have this functionality. And I love what you said. Measure, manage, reduce. It's just going to have to happen at every company. And the idea that every company then should go out and build the technology that's going to allow them to measure this stuff, to manage it, and then to reduce it is a massive waste of resources. And what you're saying is you're going to abstract that functionality out as well, and then give it back to everybody at the same time. So building once, giving to everybody is a much more efficient way to do it. But also because you get to look at multiple businesses in multiple verticals, you can also build it better because you're getting more feedback than any one individual company is going to get. So you can then build all of that stuff. Is that fair?
Yep. You've nailed it. And I'd like to just add a couple more. So HR has been around for donkey's years, right?
Yeah.
But like I told you, ESG has been around for 3 years. So
Right.
not only Is it inefficient for companies to hire? There's a talent scarcity. I mean, I have 11 people, half my team is specialists within ESG, right?
Right.
I have more ESG specialists than most listed companies in most countries
Right.
working
Right.
for
That's
me
the
right
point.
now.
Yeah.
So I never want to say that we are taking away jobs, etc., because we're not,
No, no, no.
right? We'd love to enable them, meaning there's 11 of us targeted trying to solve just this problem, because every company is going to have very few people who actually get this and have to do it for billions and billions of dollars worth of value, right? So it's almost like a force multiplier for them, right? So abstracted out, but also a force multiplier. And then finally, what would happen, like you said, is the feedback allows us to actually build a far more inclusive solution, because not every team may have the same access to the same talent, right? So they get access to our talent, which is able to then actually make a difference for them and make sure that they don't have risks. I mean, if our customers or potential customers make a mistake, right, here in this climate, in this sort of global current world order that we're in, right? It's a huge reputational and financial risk to them.
Yeah.
So I think it's even more important for them to trust technology.
It's like we want to take away people's jobs. I just want to say this. In 1927, okay, the world population was 2 billion people. And who knows what jobs they were doing? Probably most of them were farming, but not manufacturing, right? And
Mhm.
since between 1927 and 2023, when there are, I'm going to round, approximately 8 billion people on the planet, so that's 4 times more people. There's no history of technology coming, new technology coming and eliminating jobs. They may eliminate that job, but it
Yep.
just creates the opportunity for other jobs and other things, and actually, in ways, creates leisure. And I will argue with anybody about this until the day I die. Implementing technology to solve problems at scale has always helped humans. So what you're doing, whether you're doing with 11 people or 11,000 people, does not take jobs away from anybody. We can talk about artificial intelligence. We can talk about machine learning. What it does is it creates opportunity for people to then do different things and in some ways, more interesting things. I can give you 10 ways personally where artificial intelligence has made my job 1,000 times easier and allows me to do more interesting
Mhm.
things as opposed to more
Yeah.
just like rote processes. So I just want to be clear about
Yeah.
this. You're not taking anybody's job. Go ahead.
Totally, totally. No, I mean, I'm totally with you, right? Productivity increase is
Yeah.
true. I mean, the 8-hour work week, a work day is from the 1800s. That's a whole separate discussion
Right, right.
altogether. But like you rightly said, technology is a force multiplier and it gives you time for leisure. So the same people can do the same job more efficiently,
Yep.
or they can do even better things,
Yeah.
because the more mundane tasks, right? Technology solves the problems that exist today, which creates new problems. So there's always more to be done.
Yeah, exactly. And that was my point is that if the planet only had enough jobs for 2 billion people, we would already have massive problems employing 8 billion people. And yet, unemployment in the United States, just as a proxy, is lowest it's been in 50 years. And AI is still a thing. So somebody has some idea wrong. And I think you and I are right. So tell me more about Breathe ESG. Have I missed anything? Like, what does the future look like to you? What does growth look like to you? Just tell me more.
All right. I think it's interesting times for sure. I mean, we just gotten back by a bunch of so we're part of an accelerator which is backed by some of the top leaders, business leaders in the country.
Cool.
The Nikhil Kamath, who is the founder of Zerodha, one of the largest stockbrokers, right? The DLF Family Office, which is the family office of the largest real estate developer in the country, and Anthill, global VC fund. They
Yep.
just got a company public on Nasdaq a couple months ago. And that is allowing us to access other markets. So we're looking to expand out of India already, focused on our mission to the Middle East, working with customers in
Cool.
the UAE, Saudi, right? We're looking at South Africa and Australia as possible geographies. Again, anyone can use our product. So we are doubling down on our full stack mission. So we while we are called Breathe ESG, right? We also make sure that companies can do their decarbonization journey, right? Helping them calculate not just the scope 1 and scope 2, that's the direct emissions we spoke about and the electricity based emissions, but also the scope 3 emissions. So business travel is one of the 15
Yeah.
different verticals that come under scope 3, right? The different scopes. So business travel, purchased goods, purchased services, etc. We help companies calculate that. We automate those processes. That's something that no company is currently able to do,
Right.
right? You come in, your consultant makes an Excel sheet to make a baseline. Next year, another consultant comes in, they make a new Excel sheet. That's not the definition of baseline. So they're just
Right.
moving the goalpost. We come in and we solve that with tech. So we're continuously innovating our product, right? It's more of an ecosystem. So it meets you where you're at and allows you to mature in your journey. And we're expanding globally. So things are pretty interesting at Breathe.
I'm curious if you feel like a personal responsibility and then also a team responsibility to make the world a better place. You know, one of the things you said a couple of times actually during this recording is that, you know, you're going to lean into your privilege, right? You know, you're privileged. You're like in the 1% of the top 1%. And even though you're not one of the wealthiest families in India, like you said, you know, your mom's got a great job, your dad's got a great job, and you've benefited from that. Do you feel this responsibility to say, like, because we have privilege, we have more opportunity and more resources to make the world a better place? And then that's not the only reason, but one of the reasons why we should keep doing this and do it at scale.
Totally. You nailed it on the head. I mean, uh, if we think about it, right? Climate change adversely affects those that are marginalized far more than it does those that are privileged,
Yeah.
meaning that the world is deteriorating at the same pace, but the adverse effects are far worse for those that can't do anything about it. So
Right.
I think not just me, I think all of us have a responsibility, and you just have to do your part. I mean, there's no right amount, and there's no, I'm not saying everyone has to go and start a Breathe ESG or beat their chest, but everyone in their own way, right, should be a part of this transition, because collective action is the fastest path to slow down this sort of deteriorating situation that we have and becoming more resilient, right? It's not just about mitigating the impacts that are going to come,
Right.
but also adaptation, adapting to what's happening, right? Becoming stronger, being able to make sure that we're all collectively good, right? I think is something that I do believe very strongly. And everyone at Breathe, not just me.
Okay. I want to leave with that. It's a really powerful message. I cannot thank you enough for coming on the show and doing this. You have to come back. I really want to follow the growth of this because it's very important to me. I reached out to you on purpose because I really wanted to not just learn something, but I wanted other people to hear you speak about this in a way that's really eloquent and also very informed. So I really appreciate it. Shaayak Chatterjee, a co-founder of Breathe ESG. Thank you again so much for doing this. I really appreciate the time, the effort, and the information.
Thanks, Michael. Had a great chat.